morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which we are assisting to our open lecture today. I am very glad to have another open lecture of the Erasmus in Ecology Master Course, and this is an event that we have been organizing for several times, as you all know, here and I think abroad too, and this is our big pleasure to have with us today Professor Rubén Lara. Professor Rubén Lara is Director of the Institute of Oceanography in Argentina, and he has been working for a long time already in oceanography and chemistry and in wetlands, and he has been developing extensive work on relation between water quality and human health. So this is the topic of this presentation for today, and of course I am glad to have you with us. And I also want to say that this presentation is sponsored by other institutions and by research groups, as the International Center for Coastal Ecology and the UNESCO Center that we have here in Portugal, also from the University of Algarve, from the research center CIMA, and that's all. So, Professor Rubén, thank you very much. And
thank you for the introduction.
And I leave you to see
this. It's okay to put it here, this side? Put this. I mean the microphone. Microphone's okay like that? Yeah. So, hello everybody, thanks for coming. I'm very happy to have the opportunity of holding this lecture after the course, and for many of the students being here, some of the material I will present is already known, but I think it's a good opportunity to refresh what we have said before, and for the rest of the people looking in the internet, and for the newcomers, I hope this will be of interest, and that you don't get bored with this talk on the changes and hydrological cycles, and focusing on the need of a new synthesis of ecohydrology, biomedical sciences, and water management. This is a hard stuff, and it needs hard facts to get acquainted with the necessity of doing the job of putting the people together to work in this, which is not always easy, but maybe these numbers gives the foundation of the necessity of why we should work interdisciplinary on this. Well, changes in hydrological cycles and water use influence the dynamics of waterborne diseases. And why should we care about waterborne diseases? More than 3.5 million people die each year from water-related diseases, and 84% of these are children. Nearly all deaths, about 98%, occur in the developing world. Lack to access to clean water and sanitation kills children at a rate equivalent to a jumbo jet crashing every 4 hours. The only difference is that when a jumbo jet crashes, it's in all media. Yes? 443 million school days are lost each year due to water-related illnesses. So, this is to study this the way we are dealing now. Is a part of the academia, and it's very important. All these guys can go to school because of this. So, just to take home, waterborne diseases cause 1.4 million children's death every year. Well, why interdisciplinary surveillance? Well, we're talking about hydrological changes, and floods and droughts will intensify with climate change and affect health through the spread of disease resulting from habitat modification, with high risk of rapid increase in diarrheal and other diseases. We will come back to diarrheal diseases in a minute. The many pathways through which hydrologically relevant events can affect health, notably when a river or stream bursts its banks, producing changes in mosquito abundance, as in the case of malaria and dengue, or contamination of surface water with human or animal waste, such as rodent urine and the disease produced by that, that's leptospirosis. Flooding may become, well, this is draft, flooding may become more intense with climate change and can result in the spread of disease. Conversely, drafts can produce changes in vector abundance. If, for example, a vector breeds in ponds left in dried up river beds. So coastal ecosystems and their basins are rapidly changing due to anthropogenic pressure and global warming, also inducing changes in patterns of resource use. So the message, again, to take home, integrative, comparative approaches are needed for the understanding of functional links between basin structure, morphology of different estuaries, marshes and mangroves, flooding and biogeochemical regimes, pathogen life cycles, and disease incidence. Well, we are talking about integration of discipline and basin-based systems. What we finished with in the last transparency. Well, this is the numbers we have seen in the beginning. And I would like to stress that only due to diarrhea, we are talking about waterborne diseases. If we now focus on diarrhea, 3.4 million deaths per year. From this, 75% are caused by diarrhea. The disease killing around 2 million people every year, mostly children in developing countries. Thus, it is crucial to develop an integrated water and health management system, as well as the tools required to identify and predict interconnected trends in the evolution of aquatic ecosystem and diseases. This looks like only known sentences, but we will see very concrete examples of this now. While the importance of integrating natural sciences with socioeconomic research is stressed and recommended in every forum dealing with sustainable use of natural resources, human health, one of the most valuable public goods, seldom included as a significant issue in coastal management programs. So now, again, the message to take home: we need integration of socioeconomic, ecological, and medical research within the eco-hydrology framework. How? The changes in the hydrological conditions and the human dimension is what we are talking about. And there are two layers of cooperation that seldom communicate with each other, unfortunately. In many projects, let us please consider this layer now. This is, in many projects, for example, integrated coastal zone management, we have the interaction of socioeconomic research, which is mostly oriented to resource use, and natural sciences, which mostly deal with ecology and hydrology. And if we are concerned about important issues, such as, for example, vulnerability of coastal regions, say, sustainability of the resources, of the use of the resources, well, without breaking our heads too much, we can find a way to do this in an ordered way. We can just decide, well, we will follow the mainstream, and it's nothing bad about that. And we can take the 7-step procedure recommended by the International Panel in Climate Change. Nothing against that. It's a good way to do this in a manner that is comparable to other regions. On the other side, we have other projects which deal with integration of medical research and natural sciences. In the case of natural sciences, mostly geography, climatology. In the case of the medical research, I mean, in the cases where cooperation takes place, we deal with epidemiology or sanitary sanitary aspects. And just for giving you an example of the many possible, if one wants to combine both, also in an ordered way, following protocols, there is a possibility, and this is the health map program from the World Health Organization, who has developed a special software that might be a little bit now replaced by more sophisticated software but it's still an option to simply combine these two spheres of interdisciplinary work. The problem is now that, as I said before, in programs of coastal zone management, very rarely this health aspect is combined or integrated as a priority. But we think there is a way to do this also in a structured manner. And integration always implies going from the general to the particular thing. And since we need this to create or to strengthen new disciplines, it's good when we depart from the theoretical part to the instrumental aspects when we already go and take the samples or do the field work. So we need a framework for integrating this, and we have the framework. This is the Ecohydrology. We need a scale. We have it. This is the basin. We're talking about the principles of Ecohydrology. Now we need a process that integrates everything. And this is the inundation dynamics. Inundation seen in both aspects it has. The regular inundation of the coasts of an estuary or the banks of a river, and the catastrophic inundation. Both are important. And how do we integrate this in an operational fashion? We need a tool. And we propose that the tool for this, one of the possible, a very strong one, are the digital elevation models of basins, which then integrates both layers at an operational level. That could be the case, for example, distribution of soil humidity for the distribution and abundance of mosquitoes as vectors transmitting malaria. So, how do we do this in practical terms? During some of the projects we have developed basically in tropical countries, we have come up with a methodology. This is synoptic analysis of coastal wetlands, which is an eco-hydrological tool for dealing with environmental change. There are three basic layers. Under this, the remote sensing for determining the geobotanical forms, the boundary shifts of the forms, to determine the catchment areas and the watersheds. Then, this used to characterize the surface of the wetland or of the aquatic ecosystem in general, where we deal mostly with the surface biogeochemistry as a substrate providing an habitat, a suitable habitat for microbial processes. We deal in this layer with inundation dynamics, nutrient fluxes, pore water salinity, redox conditions, etc. And all this is used together with other tools for the reconstruction of the paleo-environment, the paleoclimate, the paleohydrology, the paleobotanics. And what for? To be able to predict how our system will evolve in the future when recurrent changes in climate and hydrology take place. If we want to know how this will evolve in the future, we have to take a look into the past, how it worked into the past. And the challenge is to relate human health to ecosystem patterns, which is the main task we are trying to tackle in some of the projects we are developing. We have been drifting slowly, but with firm steps towards this kind of integration through previous projects on dynamics and management of Amazonian mangroves. We will see some aspects of this through other projects, like comparison between replanted and natural wetlands in Vietnam. And now we are studying links between mangrove, estuarine, and dynamics of vibrio and cholera incidence in the Bay of Bengal through two projects, one completed, one ongoing, in Bangladesh and in India. Now that after almost 30 years I came back to my homeland, we are working on a project about diarrhea diseases and pathogenic Escherichia coli in the southern coastal Argentina, a whole basin approach together with the University of Osaka and the University of the South, to which our institute belongs. Just to show you some examples of what we have been doing in terms of basin investigations related to very massive wetlands that are sharing the first places with the Sundarbans. This are some of the largest, together with India, the largest wetlands worldwide, combining mangroves and salt marshes. There we have a 10-year project from which I would just like to show some, say, the extract of a lot of work done there, and the criteria. We use them from taking this as a basis for future projects. I said in one of the first transparencies that the development of digital elevation models was a very important tool for integrating biomedical research with eco-hydrological research. And these are linked to, these elevation models are or can be linked to coastal geobotanical units, flooding regime, biogeochemistry, microbiology, biomedical research, and coastal vulnerability. And this kind of model, digital elevation model in 3D or as contour plot, and the association of this with fieldwork and aerial photographs and relating the topography to some particular geobotanical forms gives us the information to extrapolate, for example, from the elevations provided by the elevation model, so that we can develop a model from which we could know from every point the inundation frequency, which in the end determines the distribution of the vegetation and of the microbial flora. And then we are going into, from this information, into the eco-hydrological habitat research of pathogens, and from there is a step to reach the disease distribution patterns. Well, I'm just going to show a couple of transparencies showing how it was really implemented. This three-layer transparency I showed from the remote sensing to the paleo environment, passing through the current vegetation situation. With an example from one of these peninsulas with mangroves, I showed you in the satellite image. This one, which is called, this is a very known name for Portuguese people, the Bragança Peninsula. And these are almost identical geomorphological units, say about 50 kilometers long, 20 kilometers wide. So I'm telling this because the research that is done in one of the units is easily extrapolable to the other ones, because the units are so similar in geomorphological terms. So before then, as I said before we go into the characteristic of one part of the ecosystem that might be important for biomedical studies, one has to get an idea of what is changing. Why? Because we want to identify ecotones. Ecotones are very active parts of the ecosystem. They move with high speed, with high sensitivity, reacting to hydrological or climatic changes. And these are the points where information can come and can catalyze the interest then of many disciplines. Not only going into, for example, the structure of this forest will attract mostly botanists and ecologists. So we select them some interesting parts, some indicators of change. That is what we're looking for. So we'll try to localize damaged or sensitive sectors, quantify and diagnostic what happens. So we go all the way from the evaluation of satellite images to the use of aerial photography, the field validation, and then the sampling. And so we identify regions with gains and losses of vegetation, and we identified here a region that looked very interesting. Why did it look so interesting? This was, maybe I should go back for a moment. This is mangrove invading the salt marsh. Yeah? Well, this is the ecotone shifts in coastal marshes, where we use microtopography as an indicator tool of current environmental change. Well, we had the luck that we got some radar images from the Brazilian colleagues from the early 70s, and we compared, well, this is a couple of years old, this work already, and we found that these marshes in the 70s, this was a salt and hypersaline salt marsh that occupied around 9 square kilometers. We analyzed a sequence, I'm just showing you the last one, a sequence of satellites, of Landsat images, and we saw that the mangrove was invading the salt marsh, which was very unusual because salinity was extremely high. And there is a physiological reason why mangrove shouldn't grow into this. We saw that there was a decrease of the marsh area, or an increase if you want to take the difference, a decrease of the marsh area in 25 years of almost 40%. And it was not rain what was producing this. The only way that mangrove can invade the marsh is if you reduce salinity. And if it's not rain, and we check that, the only way to take the water away, salt away from this marsh is through the wash-out effect of the tides, which reach this region only during the extremely high spring tides. And so the only way that salt can be taken out, washed out from the region, there will not be a change in the tidal regime due to astronomical reasons. It's probably the only reason, a change in the relative sea level. We checked that with the topography, and we saw that if, to test our hypothesis, if the elevation of the relative sea level was the cause for this, then the invasion should have been fastest in the flattest part of the system, because small increases in water height would have a greater effect over a larger area. And so we worked really with microtopography. I'm talking about this resolution, 5 centimeters, and we saw that in general, because there are other topographical issues there, that in general the invasion had been fastest in the flattest part of the system. And so we concluded that it was probably due to an increase in flooding frequency due to relative sea level rise. Well, this is the ecological part regarding vegetation and geomorphology. But how does the microbial community react to these shifts? We are drastically changing the ecosystem. Well, this is how the ecotone looks like. This was the part of the salt marsh, only Sesuvium portulacastrum mainly, and some Avicennia marina, Avicennia cerminas, and going into the mangrove, then we found common grasses like Sporogolus virginicus, and more Avicennia, and then going into the mangrove. And we saw, we wanted to have an idea of how, in general, the bacterial population could be distributed along this ecotone, and we analyzed the roots of the trees. We analyzed the Sesuvium, the sediments close to Sesuvium at 10 centimeters, and the rhizosphere of the Sesuvium. This is succulent, extremely highly allotolerant. We analyzed this for the total bacteria and for the capacity of nitrogen fixation. And we saw that there was an enormous difference in the amount of bacteria between the roots of Avicennia, of trees, and of Sesuvium. So we thought, well, it's not only that the water from the inundation is washing out the salt and improving the capacity of mangroves to invade, it's also that the vegetation that the mangrove will find when it's invading has already improved, as we saw also through the nitrogen fixation, has improved the fertility of the soil. And then we began to think on pathogens, and we found in the literature that a study done in India showed that the roots and the stems of both plants, but particularly Sesuvium, this one, supported large populations of Vibrio. You know, Vibrio One of the species, Vibrio cholerae, is a causative agent of cholera, which is one of the deadliest diarrheal diseases. And in Bangladesh, a new pathogenic serotype of Vibrio cholera was also found in salt marshes. This. So we see how things converge very rapidly when one deals with this kind of aspects. We're going to talk now a little bit about dams, climate, and disease. Since the 50s, several large dams for irrigation purposes were constructed in India. Some of the students here will remember yesterday that this was discussed. The Farakka barrage, yeah, which is finished in the 70s, diverts the Ganges River into the Hooghly River during the dry season to flush out the accumulated silt in Calcater's port. It cuts off Bangladesh water supply, elevating salinity. It has affected fisheries, desertification, hindered navigation, and posed a threat to water quality and public health. There is evidence of changes in cholera seasonality due to hydrologic disturbances. Before the 70s, the peak cholera season in Dhaka was November-February. In Calcutta, seasonality has changed twice since the mid-50s. The shifts may be related to change in salinity and other associated estuary biogeochemical characteristics. We said now, this that has been found in recent years was already predicted in the beginning of the 80s by a medical doctor, not by an ecologist. Yeah? But he said the Farakka barrage will change the seasonality of cholera in the region. And it happened. So, now staying in the coastal zone, we will see the effects of the other side of the inundation. What I have been telling before was related to the, say, normal inundation regime of wetlands, coupled to globally changing relative sea level. Now, in this case, we're going to see catastrophic inundation. What are the effects of catastrophic climatic events on the pathogen distribution in aquatic ecosystem? And we'll take as example part of our own work in Bangladesh. We are chasing cyclones. It can be very interesting and risky activity, but it brings a lot of knowledge about the behavior of these systems under strong stress. We were there shortly before the cyclone Akash, and we were lucky that we could perform a sampling before the cyclone along the estuary of the Karnafuli. This is Karnafuli is somewhere here below. Yeah, it's under the cyclone. Here you go to Burma, and Dhaka is somewhere here. Burma, here?
No.
Okay. And we repeated this sampling after the cyclone too. And this is the same showing how we divided for its study the estuary in three sectors: the high salinity one, the transition zone, say to create some common language with the people working in estuaries, and the low salinity zone. And we have also a land-based study for investigating the effects of a landslide that occurred shortly after the cyclone. I think just a couple of weeks later. Well, we will show then some results of an investigation of the influence of the cyclone on the distribution of Vibrio in the Karnafuli estuary in Bangladesh. And we used as indicator the counts of cultivable Vibrios. This is CDC, and the total aerobic bacteria. We determined a lot of other parameters. For the sake of this presentation, I will take just this indicator. This is the estuary, the distance from the estuary's mouth to inland. And this is the pre-cyclone situation regarding the contribution in percentage of the cultivable vibrio to the total aerobic bacteria. As we see, the pre-cyclone situation, contribution of vibrio to total bacteria, it's an indicator, this is only the cultivable vibrio, yeah? As an indicator, is a valid one. This contribution reached as a maximum 0.5%. 2 days after the cyclone, we saw that the contribution of vibrio to the total bacteria climbed orders of magnitude, reaching 5, 10, 25% of the total bacterial load was contributed for by cultivable vibrio. So this is a dramatic change in the microbial landscape and has obvious links to biomedical research and to the health situation of the inhabitants of the region after catastrophic hydrological events. As I said, there was a very bad year for Bangladesh, and shortly after that a landslide occurred. I'm just going to concentrate for the sake of time on the same indicator I showed before. It was the cultivable vibrio count, the contribution to total aerobic bacteria. If you remember, before the cyclone, we had a maximum of 0.5%. After the landslide, it climbed up to a maximum of 6%, which is also an enormous amount. The reason why it didn't climb so high, as in the case of the cyclone, is that the material washed out into the estuary was not just resuspended sediment from the estuary, which is also populated by vibrio, but it was material from the hills, which is basically minerals. So it increased the vibrio population anyway to a very high level, but not as high as in the case of the cyclone, because it's a completely different substrate which is being washed out into the estuary. But anyway, it is more than 10 times more abundant, the vibrio, in relation to the total bacterial population after the landslide. So we will take a look now to a completely different kind of ecosystem. We are going from the humid tropics to semi-arid regions, and I would very much like to show you an example from my homeland. And this deals with the Ecohydrology and the management of rapidly changing unstable water bodies in semi-arid regions, in this case particularly North Patagonia. Well, this is my hometown, this is Argentina, and there are some concerns of climatic change in the Buenos Aires province, which is one of the most densely populated regions in the whole country, which are relevant for lagoons and marshes in the semi-arid grassland region. The setting is, there has been a rainfall increase over the historic average from the 70s to the early 2000s, and we have a dry period beginning with a severe drought in 2007 to 2009. And the consequences, this switch in the climatic pattern has been for the land flooding and now erosion of agricultural land, and for inland water bodies an increase of the Odontestes bonaerensis population, pecarrei, and mass mortality events, increase of toxic algal blooms, and strong oscillations of lagoon areas and freshwater reservoirs. And we're not talking about just a couple of small lagoons. Lagoon areas range from 80 to 27,000 hectares. We have approximately 1,429 lagoons with a maximum length of 500 meters, and 50% of them have areas between 1,000 and 10,000 hectares. So This is the main issue, how to sustainably manage these unstable water reservoirs and wetlands in semi-arid regions. I don't have still the solution for this, I'm just showing the problem. Yeah? But this transparency shows how the system looked like in both situations. In the land flooding due to strong increase in the extension of this lake in the wet period produced a salinity decrease. This was a very hypersaline lagoon, and the salinity decrease resulted in the rapid development of high biomass of Odontestes bonariensis with a bloom really of large and very abundant specimens, but also produced mass mortality events due to cyanobacterial blooms. I said this today earlier in the morning. This fish normally in the rivers of the region has this size, around 20 centimeters. The specimens are not rare. They reach 60 centimeters and they reach 5 kilos compared to 200 grams in the rivers. And this is because just for chance the lagoon's salinity decreased from 100 to 20. Yeah? And situation changed drastically. People were, for a long time, used to the idea that water would be abundant, that flooding would be the main problem to solve, and that the drainage would be the main hydrological tool. But there was a drought coming in the period from 2007 to 2009, and this deeply damaged the semi-arid grasslands. You see, this is dust being driven out of the continent by the prevailing winds. This region experienced a disaster with mass mortality of cattle, loss of vegetation coverage. These were fertile areas, and is developed in a very short time to a desert due to bad water management, basically. And there were also high cattle mortality and upstream fish mortality, not in this case, not because of cyanobacterial blooms, just due to lack of water. So, another issue related to unstable water bodies in arid and semi-arid regions is not only the management of a resource like this kind of fish, which has a protein yield almost identical to the protein yield of cattle in the region, about 100 kilo per acre per year, which is very high. There's also a problem for the local population in terms of drink water availability. So the quality of water in artificial reservoirs is essential to human health, particularly in climatically unstable regions. This prolonged drought of about 3 years in South Argentina has reverted, as I said before, a period of about 30 years of rainfall significantly above the historical average and produced a decline to critical levels. In this case, this is close to my hometown. Decline to critical levels are said in the reserves of drinking water reservoirs, which, as other water bodies in the region, have suffered from recurrent summer algal blooms. However, the perception that cyanobacteria and their toxins can represent a threat to human health only in connection to acute events such as blooms should be revised and also widened to consider the possibility of other hazards such as neurologic damage as a consequence of chronic exposition. We are not talking now about acute events, we are talking about chronic exposition to toxins such as BMAA. We will see now what this means, but this is belonging to the category of slow toxins via long-term ingestion of water or in aquatic fauna. So, then to go a little bit deeper into the matter, besides the known effects of cyanobacterial toxins, the study opened up a discussion about possible new causes of known neurodegenerative illnesses, including Alzheimer's. And some cyanobacterial strains were found to produce the neurotoxic non-proteinogenic amino acid, very small, very simple molecule, uses methylaminoalanine, which is this one. which is a possible causative agent of human motor neuron disease, the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis dementia complex, and has been found to accumulate in brain tissues of patients with progressive neurodegenerative illnesses. This was first detected in humans as a consequence of dietary habits and biomagnification in terrestrial ecosystems. But BMAA was also detected in aquatic ecosystems such as seawater in the area of trichodesmian bloom, and in brackish and in freshwater water bodies. And Cox et al. Isolated BMAA in several species of free-living cyanobacteria. And since these environments where these cyanobacteria can be found producing BMAA can include water bodies used for drinking and recreational use, BMAA in drinking water might contribute to chronic intoxication. This was also detected in Canada. It's not people eating bats. We could say, well, it's their fault. Why do they eat bats? Yeah? Couldn't they eat ravioli or something like that? Well, but they detected the same in Canada. But people don't eat bats. Then many more people became interested in this. And further research showed that BMAA in drinking water may contribute to chronic intoxication by the incorporation of the neurotoxic into an endogenous protein reservoir with slow release, and the possible lag between exposure and effect of years or even decades. So, since protein-associated BMAA can accumulate with food chains, it is possible that biomagnification of these toxins occurs in marine ecosystems in a similar way to in terrestrial ecosystems. It was the case of the bats. Thus, production of BMAA by marine cyanobacteria may represent another route of human exposure to this neurotoxin. And, well, this is the reason, Castalia Fox, why this substance produced by the alga may act as a slow toxin because of this. Yeah? For this reason, it would be advisable to monitor BMAA concentrations in drinking waters contaminated by cyanobacterial blooms and in fish and animals ingesting the microbes, even if we have them at low environmental densities. And this again can be particularly relevant in semi-arid or arid regions that are highly dependent for their drinking water supply on reservoirs in which cyanobacteria can regularly occur on a seasonal basis, normally in summer, when water is scarce and the blooms occur often. So, and now some needs we detect in all this. The need to do some changes. And this is the need of biomedical monitoring. The determination of potential slow toxins such as BMAA, which is analytically quite simple to determine, at least for people that are working in amino acid chemistry. So the determination of this kind of toxins is not included in routine monitoring of drink water. However, monitoring protocols should include research modules. We have to convince the politicians to do this. The monitoring protocols must be dynamic. They must have a core, but they must be flexible and open to growth and change. They should include research modules designated to check the presence of such potential threats to human health in order to update the contents of such protocols and adapt them to the eco-hydrological settings and profiles of waterborne diseases of each region. These profiles often do not even exist, since the links between disease and dynamics of water bodies are not known. So there is a lot of work to do. They should be taken into account when developing schemes for preventing cyanobacterial blooms by manipulating natural predator communities. So the reduction of the nutrient load input to the water reservoir probably remains the best preventive measure to prevent harmful algal blooms. The water treatment should be regularly checked and improved to remove these organisms and their toxins from drinking supplies where appropriate. The normal treatments of drinking water most probably will not retain toxins. And just for the sake of time, I would like now to go into the need of ecotone surveillance, and there is evidence that the boundaries between ecological systems play a role in a number of the most important emerging infectious diseases. Just for the information, there are many different kinds of ecotones where ecological and evolutionary process can be responsible for zoonotic and vector-borne infections. There are terrestrial ecotones, terrestrial aquatic ecotones, and anthropogenic ecotones, which include this cropland and pasture natural habitat and settlements natural habitat, or combinations of these. Maybe we can shift some of these transparencies to go to a very concrete example. Nutrient pollution and degradation of the riparian habitat and the loss of ecological functions involving the assimilation of nutrients and pathogens, combined with high concentrations of domestic fauna and their waste, are commonly associated with the last ecotone I mentioned, that is human settlement and aquatic terrestrial ecotones. And a very say recent example, the emergence of avian influenza involved the mixing of 3 different communities: wild migratory waterfowl, wetlands, wild local birds, and domestic fowl, ponds, and later also pigs. And this makes the monitoring extremely complex and the decision making also. And this calls attention on some cautionary notes we can mention at the end of this talk regarding the creation of wetlands and the manipulation of aquatic ecosystems. In general, research in ecotone, particularly terrestrial aquatic dynamics, can provide vital information about changes in climate, river hydrology, and sea level and land use. And the strengthened integration of ecological and biomedical monitoring is essential to successfully restoring ecological functions and enhancing environmental, also human health. Globally, the surveillance of locally and regionally relevant ecotones could provide evidence of disease emergence related to environmental change, as I said at the beginning when we talked about the changes in the ecotone between salt marsh and mangrove. Wetland creation is also environmental change. We are dealing with this as a main tool for improving the environmental situation, but it is also an environmental change. This is not saying this is good or this is bad. This is also a change. And we have to consider this as a change. And despite being considered an enrichment of landscape ecology in terms of diversity, services, recreational value, landscape beauty, etc., the risk of increasing transmission of emerging diseases must be dispassionately considered. An increase in biodiversity, this is a very hard sentence, does not include only those species we humans like, birds, mammals, etc. It increases also the diversity of vectors capable of transmitting diseases. This we shouldn't forget. And with this sentence, I finish my presentation, and I say many thanks for your kind attention for this presentation that has taken a little bit longer as we assumed at the beginning. Thank you very much.
Is there any questions to Professor Rubén Lara?
I'm a bit curious because you had 2 examples from Bangladesh about cholera as testimony, how it really responded against extreme events like cyclone and military landslides. But it's supposed to be expect more with regular flooding. I mean, more flood, more upstreams. So, did you have any examples on flood? How it plays role in spreading these diseases, or it's just because that was more relevant? I mean,
Yes.
we have more frequent part each year, maybe 20 times, 12 times. So I think it was more important to focus on flooding event and later.
Well, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't put it in terms of importance. The spread of cholera is, as you know much better than I do, there is a very strong seasonal basis. Yeah? You have 2 times a year you have peaks in cholera. Nobody knows exactly, and really nobody knows exactly why this happens. You know when and how it happens, which is completely different to know why it happens. Yeah? Everybody says, well, this happens in the pre-monsoon, this happens in the time so and so, when it rains a lot, or it is warm, or whatever. So it is not how it happens, but why it happens. And there are many compartments you have to study. And there are no studies on a seasonal basis. How, for example, the dynamics of Vibrio in water bodies progresses through the year. The studies that exist relate sometimes characteristics of the coastal waters that correlate with cholera incidence. But people don't drink seawater. Yeah? But if you want to understand how the disease, how why these 2 peaks occur, you have to understand better the ecology of the genus and of the species itself. Yeah? And this is a question that has to be attacked by quite different means. Mostly, people deal with the immediate cause, that is the contamination of the drink water. Yeah? But nobody knows why the epidemic stops, for example. Why it doesn't just stay at a high level. It stops and it begins again a couple of months later. So there are some changes in environmental factors. Yeah? And for this we must know the ecology. And knowing the ecology means knowing where and how the agent lives. And up to now, the dynamics of Vibrio has mainly been restricted to the dynamic in the ponds. The ponds you see in the rural area everywhere that are, say, stagnant waters. Yeah? And it has been related to the dynamics of cyanobacteria too, or particularly Anabel. But nobody knows if they live mostly in the water or in the sediment. And this study is part of a larger study that shows that most probably the reservoir for Vibrio cholerae is not the water but the sediment. And what happens there when the Vibrio cholerae amount, the proportion increases so drastically, can be in part, at least in part, due to the resuspension of the benthic community. Normally, the bacterium has been seen as a purely aquatic microorganism. But there is more and more evidence that there is a very strong benthic population. Yeah? So you could say, well, why should I care? I don't eat mud. Yeah? But imagine just the consequences it could have if we don't know this kind of dynamics and we decide whether to dredge or not an estuary. Yeah? Or where do we find the Vibrio? Why? One could say, well, I don't care, I just open the tap and drink that water, and that water is contaminated, and we have to treat this water, and you would be right. However, a couple of years ago, I mean, the cholera epidemics are mainly due to one serotype, the O1 serotype. There are more than 200 serotypes of the species with Vibrio cholerae. But in, I don't even remember exactly the name, it was the year. It was a couple of years ago that the new pathogenic serotype emerged, but it didn't emerge in the urban area. It emerged in the marshes. It emerged in the Sundarbans. Yeah? And superimposed to the O1 epidemic there was another epidemic caused by another serotype that emerged not due to anthropogenic pollution, but due to some ecological processes or internal dynamics of the genus that we don't know. Yeah? And that's the reason why we are stressing the ecological aspects of the beaver population. Sorry that the answer was so long. Yes, I very much like the subject.
Any more questions? So I'd like, of course, to thank you. I'd like to say that it's a very important topic, and it shows how this transdisciplinarity, that more than interdisciplinarity, is required to deal with the issues that are related with the aquatic ecosystems, and how they even link with one else, which I think is probably an aspect that it's a little bit remote in our way of thinking, and this is important. And I would just ask you if, well, under all this climate changes and human pressure increase on aquatic ecosystems, if ecology as a tool and this approach can really adapt in terms of being proactive in finding solutions for this kind of, I suppose, dissemination and broadening of distribution of the waterborne diseases?
Well, definitely. We had yesterday, precisely, a couple of very interesting discussions about this. And of course, as I said during the presentation, the main goal remains the same, that is the reduction of the nutrients in surface waters. But we talked today in the morning about shifting also from open wetlands to degradation and to say rhizosphere dynamics. The absorption of the nutrients is directly happening in the rhizosphere through input of water in the say first 20 centimeters of the ground, and that, for example, in the case where an open wetland is not recommendable, not advisable, the Ecology can provide all the knowledge from the phytoremediation to kinds of approach where you don't have an open water scheme, but with the knowledge you have from the traditional Ecology, you can inflow the water into the earth and let the plants take up the nutrients directly below the surface, for example. This is one. The other one, which has been also extensively discussed yesterday, is not only, basically when we talk about hydrology, we think of plants taking up nutrients. We know that this is not only the only possibility. The other thing that is extremely important is the connection of vegetation to predators of pathogens or predators of vectors. How do we induce to certain types of vegetation the presence, or we introduce predators that can eliminate mosquito larvae or snails if we know that they are prone to disseminate some parasite. So I think the trophic aspect of ecohydrology is the most important tool we can incorporate into wetland creation to control vectors or pathogens directly. So I see this trophic part and in the underground absorption of nutrients the most important potential for the years to come. There's a lot of work to do.
I have another question that just popped now. We have all this world crisis and financial crisis, economic crisis. In terms of economic gains, let's say, from this kind of approach compared to the cost of healthcare after the disease happened, there is any kind of background information that we might compare and say, well, this is a good approach even in terms of economics?
There is. And there is an evaluation from the World Health Organization, which is a very broad one, but normally you use the 1 to 4 rule, and say for each dollar you invest in water, in improvement of water quality, you have a return of $4 in terms of that you don't lose school hours, you don't have women going to pick up water kilometers away from their places, that men don't get ill and can work more efficiently. This is the normal sanitation approach. Besides that, if we couple, say, water cleaning through wetlands with aquaculture, then the possibilities are enormous. Yeah? Without the risk. Up to now, this has been done. It is usually in Asia that you have the pond with the ducks and the fish. But this is not a very clean way to produce fish without going into details. But if you get, as you proposed yesterday, clean water from a wetland and the traditional eco-hydrological approach, and couple it with ponds for clean aquaculture, then of course there is a lot of possibilities, and as some of the students very brilliantly said yesterday, this could be coupled to rice production, for example. Well, there is really a lot of opportunities that mostly depend on political decisions, but we are the ones that must convince them.
Okay. So, again, I thank you, Professor Rubén,
for
this wonderful presentation, and I want to thank everybody here that attended, of course, and I want also to send my and our greetings to the people that are attending at home or whatever place they are, but especially to our colleagues from Erasmus Master Science in Ecology that are in UCH, that are in Kiel, that are in IAG, now are studying also these topics. So, thank you very much everybody for your attention, and thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you.